Hello and welcome to the Blood Reds Daily News. I'm Ben Bocek and I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer Andrew Beasley. Today we have some possibly good news and some bad news as well. I'd say we kick off with the bad news. There's been some reports in Germany that Jude Bellingham is having second doubts about joining Liverpool. What do you make of those reports? I think it comes from a journalist named Patrick Berger. And do you think it's a possibility that, based on Liverpool's form at the moment, that could influence Bellingham's decision making when it comes to the summer?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a factor. I think whatever the truth in the report, it's probably what we've all been thinking. It's one thing if Liverpool don't qualify for the Champions League and they just miss out and they finish fifth. But I mean, the way they're going at the moment, they're going to finish sort of 8th, 9th, 10th or something. And I mean, that, you could argue that it may be better for them to have no European football for a season if they're not going to be in the Champions League. And that's a case to be made. But clearly, somebody with Bellingham's pulling power in the transfer market is going to want to play in the Champions League, and understandably so. And as I say, if Liverpool just missed it is one thing, but if they can just have a terrible season, he's got to wonder, well, are they going to go back into it next year? So, as I say, however, whatever truth in it, it certainly feels like a plausible position for him to take. And I think all Liverpool fans would probably assume he would be thinking that way anyway.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think I'm more leaning towards European football, even if it's not the Champions League football. I think even for Bellingham, I think surely you'd think potentially a Europa League spot, if Liverpool can get there, is more appealing than not playing in Europe at all. I mean, it poses bigger risk, and I think there's obviously some financial rewards that come with it as well. Not as significant as the Champions League, but it's still a reasonable sum. I think that would help Liverpool out, especially if the ownership remains the same.
Oh yeah, I mean, if Liverpool are in the Europa League next season, they probably have to go for it, frankly, because I mean it's a route into the Champions League. If the league campaign won't go too well, obviously it's a piece of silverware, never a bad thing. So yeah, whilst I can see the benefits of them not being in it, I mean, at the same time, you could say, I mean, you look at this season, whenever Liverpool have had a full week to prepare for a match, they've been worse than when they've been playing games in quick succession a lot of the time. Like, they seem to like the rhythm of playing sort of every 3 or 4 days. And so maybe there is a case to be in that. But it is difficult to be in the Europa League and play Thursday, Sunday every week. But I mean, obviously the first half of the season, Arsenal have been in it. Manchester United have been in it, and they're having better seasons than Liverpool. So it doesn't have to be the be all and end all. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, certainly some European football would be something when trying to attract transfer targets, even if it's not the main prize of being in the Champions League.
I mean, I suppose we have to ask the question: if it's not Liverpool, though, where is he going to go? I mean, Manchester City is kind of future is up in the air at the moment because of these alleged breaches in financial fair play rulings. There's Chelsea who've invested a lot. Surely they can't afford to invest in another player. I mean, it would be unfeasible, I think, based on obviously financial fair play as well, in terms of how much they have spent. PSG, potentially Real Madrid, but would he want to stay abroad? Or I felt like this was the perfect time for him to perhaps come back to England and play in the Premier League.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there are a lot of reasons you can point to that suggest that Liverpool might be his preferred destination or the best destination, which is not to say that the transfer is going to happen, of course. But like you say, it's hard to see. I can't imagine anybody wanting to sign for Manchester City this summer. I mean, obviously players will, of course they will, but they're going to have to think twice about it until this is all resolved. And I think it could drag on for quite some time. And as you say, Chelsea have spent God knows how much on God knows how many players. So you would think they're out of the running. I suppose Manchester United are an option, which would be really sickening for Liverpool fans, obviously, if he were to go there. They feel like probably the most realistic Premier League rival in that sense. But clearly there's the Real Madrid factor as well, because, they've expressed their interest by all accounts. And nobody could really blame anybody for wanting to go there particularly. So as we know, this is obviously going to drag on, and he doesn't seem like the kind of, from what you see of him, he doesn't seem like the kind of person where money will be the most decisive factor necessarily, because ultimately he'll be very well paid wherever he goes. But I think Liverpool need to have a good second half of the season, because obviously these doubts that have been raised will only grow if they continue to sort of bumble along in mid-table as they are at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to note that he doesn't actually have an agent. He's advised by his father, and I think that's an important aspect when it comes to negotiations. He's not being necessarily influenced by a sort of shady agent, telling him you go for the money. And I think that's something that could help Liverpool. I think Kazi asked, left in the comment section, is the report coming from the same Patrick Berger as the ex-Czech Republic Liverpool midfielder? I believe not. I think it's just a namesake. I think there's a journalist in Germany who has the same name, so it's just a coincidence. But moving on from Bellingham to the good news that I mentioned earlier, I think the difference is, I'm just being told by the producer, is his name is Patrick with a CK, and Patrick's Berger's name, the Liverpool footballer, is just a K. So that's the difference between the journalists. But I mentioned some good news earlier, and the good news is that Diogo Jota is back in training with Liverpool, and he could soon potentially play. I think that's a pretty positive one for Liverpool, isn't it, Andrew? Just because I feel like we've really missed Jota in the last few weeks, especially with having to play Cody Gakpo in the middle without Firmino, and I really think Jota could be a major boost.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you saw at the start of the season that although Liverpool was struggling sort of with their midfield and defensively and stuff like that, the attack was still very strong. And I think the attack was strong because they were playing players who were already part of the team. Now, not so much Jota. He really hasn't featured much this season, but obviously you had Salah, you had Firmino, you had Diaz, and the attack was still good. And obviously the last few weeks, or sort of this year, really, the attack hasn't been great. But you've had Salah with Gakpo, Nunes has been in and out, maybe Elliott's up there. I think Carvalho played at Manchester City, stuff like that. So it's inevitable the attack isn't going to be as good when it's just these guys who haven't really played together much. So yeah, getting Jota back, getting Firmino back, getting Diaz back, any of these guys coming back is obviously going to be a good thing for Liverpool. And I think as well, with Jota specifically, I mean, when you look at last season, which obviously went a lot better than this one, he scored the opening goal for Liverpool 10 times, and they won every single one of those games. And you look at this season, as bad as they've been at times, the 9 league games in which they've led, they've drawn 8, and they've won 8, drawn 1. So they tend to get the job done when they get ahead. The problem is, obviously, as we know, they keep going behind. But with Jota, he scored the first goal 10 times last season. Mane was next with 6, Salah with 5. So when it came to breaking the deadlock, he was Liverpool's best player last season. And obviously he hasn't scored for quite a long time now. He had a quiet end to the season. And as I said, he hasn't played much this season. I think he got 3 assists against Rangers in that Champions League game, but he hasn't actually scored. But he has shown that he has this knack of scoring the opening goal and scoring goals in big games and stuff like this. So his return will be very welcome for Liverpool, whether he ends up playing, centrally, whether he plays on the left, Nunes through the middle, whatever it is. Having him back in the team can only be a good thing.
Is it fair to say, I mean, aside from the sort of last few months towards the end of last season, is it fair to say that he's Liverpool's best finisher when he's on top form?
Yeah, it certainly feels that way, I think. There's my dog coming in to say hello. Yeah, I think it feels that way. I mean, partly for the reasons that I've said. He's very good at breaking the deadlock and stuff like that. I mean, there's been so much focus on all the misses Nunes has had this season, but Salah has basically been just as bad, and not just with the low sort of value chances, but with the clear-cut chances as well. He's not been at his best either. So just having a slightly more reliable finisher like Jota, as much as he's on a bit of a goal drought, you have to think can only be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the stats where Liverpool rank in terms of big chances created and big chances missed, it's both quite high on the table. So the underlying numbers suggest Liverpool should be scoring a lot more than they actually are. And maybe perhaps closer to the 9-0 that they scored against Bournemouth earlier in the season than right now. And I think since the return of the World Cup, since after the World Cup break, Liverpool's top goal scorer is the own goal panel and Wout Faes from Leicester.
Yep. Yeah, that is unfortunately the case, and you're right in what you say. I mean, Nunes is top of the big chances missed list with 16. Then you've got Haaland 14. And then you've got Salah and Ivan Toney on 12. So, it has been a bit of a problem. I mean, as people always say, it's good they're having these chances. That's the more important thing, really, because finishing always sort of comes and goes. But it's just one of many issues the team have had. And clearly, if they could put away some of the earlier big chances they have in games, take the lead, they just immediately stand a much better chance of getting a positive result. So anyone who can help with that will be very much welcome back in the team.
Yeah, we'll certainly be keeping our fingers crossed that Jota gets a few goals and manages to stay fit as well. I think that's the most important part for him now, because he's picked up a few niggles here and there, and obviously this long-term injury as well. So I think that's key as well. But I think that about wraps it up for today. Thanks, Andrew, for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for leaving your comments and tuning in. And as always, do check out the rest of the Blood Red content going out today and all the written content on Liverpool.com as well.